Hi, my name is Chris Groom and this is the Elevated Edge. Today I want to talk to you about the discovery call. This is by far one of the most critical parts of your sales process. And if we get it right, it elevates us from being average to being exemplary. Now, my sales career in software sales has spanned over the last 12 to 13 years, both as an individual contributor and then into a sales leader. So the discovery calls that I've seen, both good and bad, have really allowed me to learn and to share with you today some of the key skills to making them successful. We need to remember that a discovery call isn't just a checkbox exercise. It's an opportunity to get under the cover of the organisation you're speaking to and diagnose the challenges that they face and look to a future or new state with them. Because when we get the discovery call right, we move from just being a salesperson to being a trusted advisor. And when we're a trusted advisor with that organisation, we form a partnership, and that partnership can propel us in our relationship with them, but also in supporting their project and their ongoing projects. And that is the key to success. That is the key to preventing stalled deals in your pipeline. So join us as we go through 5 key steps or 5 key chapters of the discovery call and pick out some of those key points that can help you excel. So let's jump straight into the first chapter, or Act 1. This is all about the power of preparation for your discovery call. The reality is that this is one of the key areas that gives you a competitive advantage to all those other organizations that are trying to meet with your buyer. The power to prepare doesn't start moments before you sit the discovery call or meeting. It happens and starts the moment you book it. Now, what do we look for in our preparation? I think there's a number of key things. The first is to understand the company that you're meeting. So get onto their website, have a look at press releases, how they operate, what their story tells you about them as an organization. This is real gold, because what we're going to start forming is synergy and correlation between who we are and who they are. The second is to understand their market. Look at who they compete against, who they partner with. And because we're going to use that data later in our discovery call. Really understand what generates business for them, what motivates them as an organization, and understand that competitive dynamic that they have. The third, study the person or people that you're meeting. LinkedIn is one of our key tools here. Especially if you've got something like LinkedIn Sales Nav, you can really start to dig into who they are, what their profile tells you about them, what articles and posts they may interact with, what they may share themselves. And then you can look wider from that. Do they have a company profile? Is there anything in the industry news about them? You start understanding them as an individual, their motivations, how long they've been at the organization. And now one of the key things that I talk to my reps about is look at their employment history. Where else have they worked where they may have used your product or come into contact with your product or service? But also, where may they have worked where you also have a contact? Think about those second and third layer connections, because that's a great way to build rapport. The next thing is mapping out their competitors. So we talked about researching them and understanding their market, but also look at who the competitors are, who's down the road from them, but what their competitors do. Are the competitors linked to any of your competitors? Are their competitors using your product or solution? Because that gives you a really compelling story later in the discovery. One of the most important things that we often miss in a sales cycle is FOMO. We all have the fear of missing out. And so when you can understand their business and potentially use that in a summary point or later on in the discovery or indeed in the sales cycle, it can add a lot of value for you. Prepare relevant stories. So this correlates to competitors. This correlates to what they do as a business. If you can deliver and tell a story, or at least have that in your back pocket about similar organizations that you've worked with, you can really work the feel, felt, found philosophy in the back end of your discovery. The ability to tell a story allows the customer or the prospect to download what they've told you, and that you then formulate into, we've been there before. We have experience of working with them. And that's a really, really powerful tool that we can use to emphasize the synergy and the value in working together. Now, what you could also do perhaps in your preparation, and this doesn't work every time, is develop a strategy or a hypothesis, i.e., I feel like, based on what I'm seeing, these are going to be some of the pain points. Now, I did this when I was first out selling payroll in the regard of, I think I know what the typical challenges are of a business like this. And so I'm going to have those prepared. So if the conversation stalls or I'm not hearing enough context to really validate and move forward, I can introduce some of my hypotheses to the meeting and see how the buyer responds. So something that you can use, doesn't necessarily work every time, but always good to have in your back pocket. The end result of our preparation is that we enter in a professional and credible manner, and we can validate what we're coming to the meeting to do and to meet with the buyer. So our second stage or second chapter is all about framework for the meeting. So it's really important to come into a discovery with an understanding of the framework you want to follow. And why that's important is because it allows us to ask a number of questions and listen to a number of responses while still framing what other information you need to get out of that meeting. The key to that is that it allows you later in the sales cycle to prevent the deal from stalling or to prevent the deal from not reaching the conclusion that you potentially want, because you've followed something that allows you to look back and evaluate where you have got to and what questions you've asked and what responses you've got. So framework that I use right now with my sales team is MEDDIC, and there's a number of iterations of MEDDIC, MEDDIC and so on that you can use. Now, it's not a tick box exercise, it's a framework that really helps you move the meeting in the right direction, ask the right questions, and hopefully look for the responses and then dig deeper. Now, the key secret to framework, but the secret to the entire discovery really, is to listen more than you talk. For some of us, that's pretty difficult. But the reality is, if we are talking more than 50% in the discovery call, we're talking too much. Because what we should be doing and what we need to be mindful of doing is asking open-ended questions so that that allows the buyer or buyers to talk to us about whatever we've asked. And then blend in some closed questions towards the back end where we're looking to drive change or drive action. So let's talk about the framework of MEDDIC. The first is metrics, and that's the M. Now, typical questions that we may ask is, what does success look like in numbers? Now, this doesn't always work in discoveries, but where it works well is when you're matching it to a certain type of buyer that you might be engaged with. So, job titles that carry CFO or finance orientation, they're going to be really interested and motivated by numbers. So that brings a great deal of value to the meeting. It also helps you explore impact. So help me understand how those numbers affect your team and then the wider team. It allows you to quantify, and you'll be able then to bring that back in at later points in the sales cycle, but also at the back end of the discovery, because you can put a value on the pain or the problem that they have delivered to you. The E of economic buyer. So this is where we're asking who else is going to be involved in a decision or evaluating the decision. So it helps us identify final authority. Now, I see a lot of deals that stall, and they stall for the key reason that we've stayed close to the champion the whole way through the process, but we've never really asked the question of who's actually going to hold that budget, who's going to make that signature. And so by asking it early on, it allows us to understand, do we need to multi-thread? Do we need to bring that person in to drive the conversation forward? Or do we work with our champion to enable that person then to join the process? Decision criteria. This also kind of blends with the decision process. So we're asking some really good questions here around when you've been through an investment like this before or a similar process like this before, what factors determine success? What did good look like to you? And then you can pepper that into the decision process. Walk me through the last time you made a purchasing decision. What steps did you have to go through as an organization? So these two are really, really key, but they're also quite blended in what you can ask and how you ask them. So think about how you use that in your discovery. I is the next one, and this is identifying pain. Now, for me, this is by far one of the most important aspects of your discovery meeting, because pain comes on different levels. First, we have the ability to identify pain on the individual's level. So this problem, how does it impact you and your job? But then we are moving that pain to how it impacts a wider audience. So perhaps it's the stakeholder pain. Perhaps it's how does it impact the director of the business if you're not one? Or how does it impact your wider team? And then we have the third level pain. How does it impact the business? Forward momentum, competitive advantage, whatever that might be. Because fundamentally, each business is motivated in very, very similar ways. They're reaching their goals that you may have found from your research into their. They're trying to take market share or something similar to that. So the more that we can understand the pain on different levels, the better. And that's going to really help our questioning as we go through the discovery. Now, probing questions that allow us to find the root cause are things that we should bring into all of this. So what's driving that? How long has it been like it? What have you tried? What may have worked but doesn't work now? What keeps you awake at night? It's one of my favorite questions the word for me, used to use all the time. These are all things that we can move because the goal is that we're trying to move what is the problem to how much pain are you in and how can we drive efficiencies and improvements. And then the final piece on MEDDIC is champion. So it's more than likely that if you're meeting with a buyer, they're probably going to be your champion, but identify it and test it and equip them so that they can really drive that change in the business. So the key thing we're learning along the way is that we're asking questions to listen. We're not trying to problem solve. And the real discipline that we have to learn as salespeople involved in the discovery is that we're not asking these questions just to check a box or to get through to the next stage. We're asking these questions because we care. We're that trusted advisor. Remember that. Because as soon as you come across that you are asking questions to tick a box to move on, the buyer or the people that you're speaking with will know that you're not actually listening. So we really need to practice that. So let's think about chapter 3 or stage 3, act 3. We're using different words as we go through. This is all about the art of going deeper. So just asking surface level questions is never enough. We need to ask multiple layered questions to really uncover pain and problem so that we can then build a solution. So there are loads of different techniques out there that you can use to dig deep. Irrelevant of the tool that you use, irrelevant of the framework that you use, one of the things that you really want to practice is the power of silence and the power of a pregnant pause. Because too often our human nature is to fill the void of silence in a meeting, especially if we feel slightly uncomfortable. Just think about a conversation you have at home. Can you sit in silence with a group of friends, or is there always someone that has something to say to fill that void? Now, in a discovery type scenario, when we're narrowing down on some of the largest challenges that they find or may experience, we need to practice the ability to stay a little bit quiet. Can you practice 10 seconds of being quiet? If it feels awkward, that's the right amount of time. Because by doing that, the prospect is more than likely going to open up a little bit more. So you told me about this pain that you experience. What does that mean to you? As they talk, you listen. But when they finish, you don't say anything. Because actually by doing that, more than often, the response you're going to get is, actually, that is the pain, but there's something deeper, and this is what it is. Silence is where the true insights are born within the discovery call. So it's a really, really key thing to practice. Doesn't come naturally, but do try it. The next technique is one that my wife will tell you I absolutely hate, peeling the onion. I'm not a fan of onions in any way, shape or form. However, peeling the onion really allows us to run through a discipline of going deeper and deeper and deeper, much like as you peel, right? Pretty obvious in the name. How we practice that in an opportunity, in a discovery, is that we ask questions and then dig a little bit deeper. So you mentioned X challenge. Tell me more about that. And why is that a concern? And how long has it been an issue? And who else does it impact? Because the more that you ask, the more that you're finding out. Couple that with the ability to be quiet or silent and listen. The buyer, the person you're speaking to, is going to tell you more and more and more about what's going on. And that is real gold that we can use throughout the entire sales cycle for your benefit but also to couple it back to the reason why they're engaged with you and to drive your differentiating factors. Now, the next one is emotional drowning. This is one that I used for a number of years. It was taught to me by an American organization I worked for, and I really felt value in this. We used to position it as a bit like a V. That's not a very good V, but a V nonetheless, in the fact that you're working down to a point to show a new way. So emotional drowning is really picking up on key points that they may have told you about problems they've got and sort of using the same questioning we do with peeling the onion. So you uncover it, but you're trying to drive them to a slight point of discomfort without being out of line, but to the point where they're really, really feeling the impact of not getting something right. So you mentioned to me that there's a challenge that you face in the organization and it costs you time. Because it costs you time, you're telling me that impacts the other divisions. So how do they feel about the task that you should have done? Okay. And if those other divisions can't do that task, what happens for them? Right. And because of X, Y, or Z, as the domino effect ripples, what does that mean? So if I reflect all that back to you, Mr. Buyer, that you have a problem, it impacts, it affects, it costs more time, a reflection upon you, is there a way that you cannot allow this to happen any longer? And what you're trying to do is take them a pathway where actually they can't see another way out. They're drowning by the emotion of the fact that if they don't fix it, it's them on the line. And that's where you come in and you turn to say, you're not alone. I've seen these things, feel, felt, found. I bring in my case studies, I bring in my stories from preparation, and this is how we help organizations move forward. That is a profound tool that you can use, which pushes you into being a trusted advisor and partner to their organization. So we blended the back of that into using stories. And we use stories in a feel, felt, found type of philosophy to really quantify and value the story and the conversation that we've had against other proven successes. Again, reiterating trusted advisor, partner in process, etc. But it also shows that we've practiced active listening and we can correlate and that we prepared. Now, the final thing here is something you can use in any of these stages is the future vision. So we've talked about all your challenges, all your problems, etc. Tell me what a year from now looks like if you don't change, if you do nothing, status quo. And tell me what a year from now looks like if you do change. Okay, and how do we get there? Open-ended question, silence. Okay, so now we've talked about 3 different areas of the discovery: the preparation, the framework, and the tools that we can use. Now we combine all those, they're going to be nothing without practicing chapter 4, stage 4, act 4, which is discipline, process over personality. There is no excuse for not preparing for a discovery meeting. The discovery meeting is the most important part of your sales process. Like I said right at the start, it's going to prevent stalled deals. It's going to allow you to have a qualified pipeline. But if you don't prepare and you don't keep discipline throughout the entire process, you will face challenges. So here are 4 disciplines that you can practice within your discovery to keep you on point and to keep you driving and surging forward. We talked about be prepared, but you have to also keep an air of flexibility. So how do we do this? So I have a hints and tip sheet that I share with my rep. It's the top 20 questions that we should ask. If nothing else goes right in that discovery, you've got a series of prepared questions that you can take through, which will allow you to qualify the fit and the opportunity to work together, or to actually say, I'm not hearing what I need to hear, I'm not seeing, can we work together in this state? The second is note taking, because we're active listening, but we will also be very conscious of what our next step is or where we need to take the conversation. So there's loads of tools, and I've seen more recently a lot of people using AI or call recordings to allow them to take those notes and bring them together to a summary. But if nothing else, take meticulous notes, write them down. I'm a little bit more old school. I still like a pen and paper, and it has a very good impact as well upon the buyer or the people that you're meeting with, if you're sort of saying, that's great information, pause there just while I get that down, okay, great. And it also helps with a summary back to them as well. Really good buying example of how you are understanding your buyer. The third is summarize and control. So as we're going through our questioning, using our framework, keeping our discipline, we can summarize at any point. I'm just checking back in that this is where we're at so far. Do you agree? Close question. Yes or no? Great. And so we move to this part. Right. And I'm just summarizing where we got to here, and here's an action. So it's like a call and confirm. But what it demonstrates to the people you're meeting with is that you're listening and understanding what's going on. And then that, for you, is driving your actions for the next step. Always be clear with your next steps. Having vague where we're going to take this after this meeting doesn't convey to the buyer that you have confidence in the process. So be very clear and very detailed. Everything that we've reflected on, I see a pathway forward. This is what it is. Do you agree? Close question. Fantastic. So let's book a time and a date to move forward. It's always important to schedule whatever's going to happen next with them while you have them. It drives urgency and creates momentum. If you just allow to say, great, thanks very much. I'm going to reflect on this. I'm going to come back to you with some actions. They're also going to leave the call going, that was good, but where do we go? Buying made easy is very important, especially if you've had such a great conversation, right? You've built that rapport to become that trusted advisor. So make sure you're driving it to the next point. And the last one is one which can be quite mixed. As a sales leader, I'm going to tell you I love to hear this, but there will be sales leaders out there who probably don't love to hear this. And this is the courage to disqualify yourself based on the meeting. We are not always going to be the right fit or the best fit for every organization we meet. There are going to be times as salespeople that we take a discovery call to fill our pipeline, or we feel like we need to fill our pipeline because we're in a quiet period, because our MQL conversions are a little bit light, or indeed, maybe you've just had a fantastic quarter and now you've taken your eye off the ball slightly and you've got to rebuild your pipe. But the discipline to disqualify, for me as a sales leader, is so important. I would rather you have a smaller pipeline, but a more qualified pipeline. What we also need to remember about disqualifying is have we or have we not heard key things? If we bring BANT back into the equation, have we heard, have we questioned, have we challenged that they have a budget? Think about that decision maker, that decision process. Have we qualified, have we heard that they have authority to move this process forward and they're the right people? Do we know they've got the need for our product or solution? And are they reacting to a timeline? Are they window shopping, or are they against a set flat objective? Do they have a timeline for implementation, or whatever that might be? So having these factors in your head, bringing in different tools, that's really important, because if one of those is missing, don't be afraid to call it out. Thank you very much for your time. We've had a fantastic conversation. I've learned a lot about your organization. I see these as the key actions, but there's something that concerns me here. What concerns me is we've gone through all of this, but you're not in a place where you have a budget. Is that right? Or have I misinterpreted something? So don't be afraid to disqualify, but then also challenge the point with them. So we talked about disqualifying, but as part of that disqualification, or indeed that qualification, we need to close. And this is kind of like the final chapter, really. Wrap it all up, agree next actions, next steps, but also summarize everything that you've heard and learned. Go through those frameworks, go through that criteria, that discipline that we talked about, because that'll really help you understand that the next steps are the right next steps. Now remember, the discovery is never a pitch. The discovery is exactly that, discovering as much and learning as much as you can about that organization, maintaining the fact that you talk for less than 50%, and you listen and proactively listen, you practice pregnant pausing, and you get as much as you can out of that organization, coupling in your preparation. That is how it's going to be effective, and that's how it's going to benefit you, right? And pay dividends in the latter part of the sales cycle. Now, there is science that proves the discipline of discovery leads to better sales. It leads to sales that stick to timelines, and it leads to sales that drive higher average order value. Because you've quantified, qualified, you've got compelling reasons for change, you understand pain, but you've used the onion to peel back, you've emotionally drowned them. And so you can keep coming back to that throughout the sales cycle. And that will help you maintain your price point. And that is what we're all in sales for. So here's the final thought, right? An effective discovery is going to unlock a lot of success for you in your sales career. Those that perform effective discoveries and follow frameworks similar to what we've discussed today have better qualified pipeline, have a higher average order value, and ultimately avoid having stalled deals. Remember, a discovery is not a checkbox exercise. It's an opportunity to understand and evaluate an organization and the problems and pains that they face, and unpick and peel back layers to know more. Now, there are 3 key things that I'll leave you with above everything else that we've talked about. The first is be challenging, in a professional manner, of course. Practice the ability to not just accept the surface layer questions you get, to dig a little bit deeper and to challenge their perspective or indeed their understanding on a scenario that they might be facing. That is what differentiates you. Second is being memorable, preparing for an opportunity meeting, following through with a framework, asking open-ended questions, listening and practicing that pregnant pause. These are all things which make you different and make you stand out. Use your differentiating factors, whatever they might be. The more you practice and rehearse before the meetings, the better you will perform. But leave them with something that makes them remember who you are. People will always buy from people, and people that prepare are more likely to be the preferred person to buy from. And the final piece is be you. There's a lot of methodology out there. There's a lot of things that salespeople are doing, which they'll tell you is the reason why they've been to President's Club and they've closed 6-7 figure deals and all those types of things. You are you, and there's only one of you. So be yourself in every sales opportunity. Use your skill set, use your training, use your craft to fine tune who you are, but always be yourself. Because if we can be memorable, we can be challenging, but we can be ourselves, that's how we're going to get success every time in a discovery. So I'll leave you with that. But before I go, there's a couple of books which you might really enjoy reading that I use as reference day in, day out as a sales leader. The first is Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blount. Fantastic book. If you don't know him already, pop onto salesgravy.com, I think it is. Loads of podcasts and loads of sharing material on there. Whole array of books that you can listen to, read, etc. Really, really good. As you can see, I practiced this one for years. This is one of the books that I send out to every rep that works for me on their first day. So I think there's some real fundamentals in there which help you be successful. The second is the MEDDIC textbook. This is by Andy White. Again, this is something that's being adopted as a methodology and a framework across organizations. And so if it is something coming in your business, really take the time to have a read of it. It's a really valuable source. And then the third is a new one that I've recently only just picked up, Deconstructing the Discovery. Now, this is aimed a little bit more at those that are perhaps going through slightly higher level discoveries. But again, some really good points. And the point about all these is that you're not looking to follow every single thing they say. You're looking to pick up snippets that you can bring into your own repertoire for success. So I'm Chris Groom. This is the Elevated Edge. This is the first video that I've done in long form content, but I'd love for you to let me know what you think. I'll be presenting this exact content live very, very shortly to another team. So any feedback is appreciated. And like always, I would really, really value it if you could like this video, perhaps even subscribe to this channel and interact in any way, shape or form that you see fit. Thanks for your time. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you again soon.